Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Tony, it's so good to be with you. Feel like we go through this nice rhythm during the season where we're seeing each other, at least online, every single day. And then now we get to the off season. It's like, I'll go days without seeing you. Yeah, we're texting, we're on the board together, whatever. But still, it's nice to be getting back together with you. And more importantly, Tony, with the audience to talk a little Buckeye football.
Much more importantly, with the audience. And Tom, I don't know if you know this. I think this week we might start seeing some college football magazines, or at least one, populating the stores. I've been to Barnes & Noble 2 days in a row now. This is my annual pilgrimage until it finally shows up. And it's like, hey, I don't know if it's Lindy's or Athlon, whichever national magazine shows up first. But we are to that point. We're going to start seeing some projections and all conference this and position groupings there. So Tom, what I wanted to do today is I want us to each draft 5 Buckeyes that we believe will be all Big Ten, first team all Big Ten this year. And the winner wins. The loser, great shame, dishonor to their family and to humanity as a whole. So we'll go back and forth. We can't pick the same guy, Tom. I know you just like, if you had your druthers, you would just pick what I pick. But you can't do that. Once a player has been selected, he is off the board. Now, because I'm a kind, gentle human person, I would let you go first. And again, first team all Big Ten, media or coaches. Media carries more weight because that's canon here. So anyway, Tom.
I live in American society. I know why. Yeah. There's a very obvious first pick here. However, I'm going to limit this to Americans. So we're going to set Nick McLarty off to the side and Joe McGuire. So we're going to limit it just to Americans. So, Tony, with that being said, now that the obvious first pick is off the board, now we're going to go with Jeremiah Smith. He is a wide receiver. This is his second year of college football. Traditionally, players get better from their first year of college football to their second because generally as a freshman, you're not playing a lot. And even when you're playing, you're not generally doing much because you're not physically ready to play at the college level. So without taking the time to go back and look at any numbers for last year, I'm going to assume that was basically the Jeremiah Smith story. And so that now this will be his first chance to make a real impression on the college stage. Maybe make some big plays, some highlight reel plays in big moments, something like that. I think I feel pretty confident not only in writing him in with a nice big fat marker as a first team all conference, but probably a first team all American as well.
Yeah, I just read a piece from Adam Rittenberg at ESPN.com talking about college football's top playmakers for the 2025 season who are not quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. He was number 1 on the list, as you would expect. So good selection there. I people maybe just now hearing about him. You'll see. Go watch. Check YouTube. Google him, and see how that goes for you. I had him number 2 on my list. Frankly, my number 1 pick in this one is going to be Caleb Downs because the thing is, he has similar to Jeremiah Smith, but Caleb Downs can also hide. Like he is so well known, everybody loves him. He only needs probably post like 70 tackles, and he's going to be first team all Big Ten just because voters are sheep, coaches mainly. But I don't expect him to just mail it in. He's going to play very well. And he's going to be on every single defensive player of the year list, every single all Big Ten list. Oh, Tom, if you were into clickbait or if you wanted to like anger some people, put out an all Big Ten list and have Caleb Downs second team, like behind anybody. Have him second team, or even if you really want to see the world burn, third team, and just have some fun. So that is my number 1 pick. Caleb Downs, safety. Sorry, I didn't mention that. Ohio State junior, maybe his last year with the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I feel like much like you could probably write Jeremiah Smith's name in as a Biletnikoff finalist right now, I think you could probably write Caleb Downs' name in as a Jim Thorpe Award finalist right now. Do they still do the big event where everyone goes and dresses up and they have like a college football? I feel like they don't do that anymore, but I've never watched that. But
yeah, it's different. It's I can't say if
so he's probably he probably doesn't need to worry about renting a tux for that. But can I just say it's not completely outrageous to think that he might be in New York for the Heisman ceremony? I mean, you could see that, especially we saw him return a punt, first time in 10 years that an Ohio State Buckeye returned a punt against, did it 10 years almost to the day against the same team that Jalen Marshall did, Indiana, in November 2014 to 2024. So you might get a little bit of the special teams bonus for you there in terms of a Heisman candidate or candidacy. But yeah, he's going to have the highlight reel plays. He's going to have the name recognition. There are people who have already written in, like, they've already written his name on the top of their Thorpe Award ballot, and it's just, okay, who else is going to be on there this year? So he and Jeremiah Smith, both of those guys, I think those are the easy top two on the most likely to fill in the blank just about anything national college football or regional college football this year on the Ohio State team. So now, Tony, it gets a little more interesting. And my next guy, I'm going to go with Sonny Styles. And he was a second-team All-Big Ten in 2024. He's got the name recognition that will help with the media vote and help with the SIDs who fill out the coaches' ballots vote. So you'll have some name recognition to help there. But he's also, you saw how good he was. You saw how explosive he was. You saw how impressive he was. And now this is his second year as a linebacker. So you figure there's going to be another step forward there. I think you're going to see him in a little bit of you're going to maybe see him put in some different spots and some different roles with Matt Patricia now calling the defense instead of Jim Knowles. So you might have some opportunities to do some different stuff, rush the passer in different ways, perhaps. So I think Sonny Styles is behind the two really obvious ones. I think Sonny Styles is the third pick here.
Yeah, he was in my group of 3-4. I actually moved him down one spot for my number 3 pick. But yes, he's got the attention. He's going to have some numbers. Who knows if they start attacking with him and he's in the backfield making the TFLs, he could certainly blow up, and he could start being on some national defensive player of the year list if you get those kind of stats, because that's kind of what you need. You need the big splash plays and maybe an interception or a fumble return or something, just more than just the tackling. But the tackling alone and the name recognition will get him first team All Big Ten. I would agree with you there. I think that is the clear top 3. I think the fourth guy for me here, which I said it moved up to number 3, is Carnell Tate. And you look at they lose 81 catches from Emeka Egbuka. You're going to have, I think that's a good number to expect, perhaps, for Carnell Tate, should they make it that far. But again, these he's not going to have 81 catches in the regular season or the first 13 games when the ballots come in. I believe the ballot's based on just the first 12 games. And so, you're talking 50, 60, 70 catches, and you look at what the Big Ten has lost. They've lost their top 5 receivers in terms of receptions. So there's an opportunity there for Carnell Tate to move in. I think this is a little bit of a projection, but also one that makes sense because he is an Ohio State receiver. And that's, if you're going to gamble on a bet on any of the positions in the Big Ten to be all Big Ten, I think like Ohio State receiver is a good one. However, to have 2 of the 3, if they do 3, that's, and I can't remember if they do 3 or just 2, but to have both of them, it's a little bit of a gamble there, Tom. Now, as I'm talking myself out of it, I have not taken my finger off the checker, but we've already talked about it. I don't want to just jump on another player here. So I will say Carnell Tate. Done.
I had him on my list, and then I took him off of my list for the exact reason that you were just sort of running through there, where it's 3 wide receivers. Oregon's going to have a guy. Penn State is probably going to have a guy this year, and I think you're going to have folks not – Jeremiah Smith is such a given that I think you're going to not want to have people not wanting to put 2 Ohio State guys on the first team, because then it looks, then it looks like you're just kind of going down the Ohio State list. I think he's going to end up second team, and it's going to be quite possibly, at least partially, Jeremiah Smith's fault. So I did not have him on my list.
Can I tell you real quick? Emeka Egbuka was third team last year.
Yes. Yeah. I think you have people who go, well, I don't want to see, I don't want to be too basic and just go, well, they have the best passing offense, so therefore I'm going to just put all their people on there. Everyone wants to be cute. There's going to be some guy from Illinois who's like second team all Big Ten, and it's like, who? But this is how the voting goes. This is, someone from Washington is going to have a good year this year. Like there's so many teams. I don't think you're going to get 2 first team wide receivers. So deserving, yes. On the team, I'm going to say no. I am, however, going to say, Tony, Max Clare could be that guy for Ohio State. He was third team last year. Now, he was third team. His stats were great. His stats last year, 51 catches, 685 yards, only 4 touchdowns, but 685 yards as a tight end. Boy, that's a big number. I don't think he's getting to that number this year. I think he could have, Colston Loveland is gone. Luke Lachey is gone. A lot of the guys who you've sort of been able to sort of pencil in at all Big Ten tight end, Tyler Warren is gone. Like those guys are all gone. You're kind of going to be looking for someone. Max Clare is a little bit of a name already. He's going to be playing on the Ohio State team. He's going to put up nice numbers. I think we've talked about this in other shows. I don't think he gets to 51 catches. I don't think he gets to 600 yards. I do think he's going to double that 4 touchdowns this year. He 8-10 touchdowns as a receiver, entirely possible. And you put those numbers up, plus you have the name recognition. It feels like it's more likely to me that you get a tight end instead of a second wide receiver.
I shouldn't even say this, Tom. I'm embarrassed because this is the year of the tight end. I didn't even have Max Clare on the list. I just completely overlooked it. I went from receiver to offensive line as if the position does not even exist. That is my fault. Because look at you
lobbying for the Ohio State offensive coordinator job. Tony, the position is filled. You cannot apply for the position. It is not currently vacant.
Because this is a perfect pick, and I don't say that lightly, and I'm going to strike it from the record. But I think of the top 6 tight ends that in terms of catches in the Big Ten last year, he is the only returner. Mm-hmm. And so he's already marked in, heavy pencil, and they're getting ready to put it in pen. Gosh, I don't like this topic anymore, Tom. Let's scrap the show. Let's do something different. Let's change it up.
Before we move on, let's talk about the stakes for this show in terms of, does this determine who's on the cot of shame for the entirety of the football postseason? Because it feels like maybe it should be.
No, this is just for fun. Oh. I said it at the outset of the show. This is just for fun. I will also say, Tom, I did vote on the All Big Ten team last year. So if I do the same thing this year, I can guarantee you who I am not voting for and who I am voting for. So just keep that in mind. I do have a little bit of power potentially in this contest because it's certainly not with my choices. My next choice, Tom, I'm going to go with this. This is actually difficult because I can go with projection. I can go with name recognition, although I'm going to go Carson Hinsman. Because there is name recognition a little bit. And offensive line, that's all you need in terms of getting the media vote. So he's been a former starter, and now he's a returning starter. He's known. So I think that helps. And if Ohio State gets out and moves the ball against Texas in the outset, then you're going to start hearing quite a bit of talk about the Ohio State offensive line, this rebuilt offensive line. It's not all that rebuilt, but I'm going to go with Carson Hinsman as my number 3 pick.
I like that pick a lot, and I can already hear in my head, if they do well against Texas, if they're moving the ball against Texas, especially if they're running the ball against Texas, what are they going to say? What are you going to hear Gus and Joel talk about? Tony, they lost in the middle of last season. They lost the Remington Award center, Tony, and they didn't miss a beat. Carson Hinsman stepped right in there at center, and they didn't miss a beat, and they win the national championship. And here he is, and he's, that's going to be the narrative around him, and everyone's going to be watching that game. And so, yeah, I think that's a very, very good pick. He was not the offensive lineman I had highest on my list, but as you're talking, I can just, that name recognition, it's so often, I think a lot of this has to do with understanding how people vote. And yeah, it's great to, the media is people like us who are covering a team. And when we're covering a team, we're spending all Saturday watching that team. We're not generally able to sit down with, the wall of televisions in front of us and watch 12 games and do all that kind of stuff. You're covering a team generally. And so then with a lot of these positions, you kind of cheat and you look at some of the stats, and maybe you're looking at the advanced stats, but a lot of times it's wide receivers like, well, who's put up the most touchdowns this year? Who's put up the most yards this year? A lot of the stuff comes down to that. With offensive line, there aren't stats really. It's, you can look at who's a Remington Award finalist, who's an Outland Award finalist, who's whatever, who's projected as a high draft pick in the NFL, but there aren't stats, individual player stats really to look at for, other than the really advanced stat stuff that sometimes can be a little dodgy on the individual player basis. Cause how much does PFF really know about the, who's on which run track? Maybe. So I think that Carson Hinsman's a very good pick there. I'm going to kind of take a little bit of the same thought process, and I'm going to slide a couple spots down my list, but I'm going to go with James Peoples here. Yeah. And all the same stuff about that we just said about, hey, they lost these important players and they didn't miss a beat. And boy, if they're moving the ball against Texas, if James Peoples runs for 120 yards and a couple touchdowns against Texas, they lost Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins and they didn't miss a beat. Now, last year, both of those guys, do you know where those two guys were in the Big Ten awards voting last year?
One of them was first. Were they both second team?
They were both third team last year. Yeah. At least on the list that I looked at. Now, a lot of that is a function of those guys split carries. And so you didn't have the big numbers that I was just talking about. You don't have those eye-popping numbers. I don't think you're getting as much of a 50-50 split this year. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe C.J. Donaldson gets every bit as many carries as James Peoples does, or maybe Bo Jackson earns more carries, whatever the case may be. I think you're going to see where you had two guys who finished last season with 1,000 yards each and 10 touchdowns each. I think you have a chance to see James Peoples maybe end up in that 1,200, 1,300 kind of yard range. I don't know if that's going to be the numbers at the end of the regular season or the end of the season, the full season, but I think you could see him getting more, a bigger bulk of the carries, which could give you some bigger numbers. And if you start the season with James Peoples ran for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns against Texas, and then he just kind of is methodical in all the games that people aren't watching, and then he has a good game against Penn State or he has a good game against Michigan, that's kind of how you build a narrative case for, boy, this is, they didn't miss a beat on the ground. I think the offensive line's going to be pretty good this year. I think they're going to lean a little bit more on the running game this year. So I will go with James Peoples for my next pick.
He was number 5 on my board, and I went past him to grab Carson Hinsman. So I was hoping I could come back to that one, and no, I can't. And I'm looking at last year's All Big Ten team. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, neither one of them, they were both honorable mention, and they're both back. Penn State has a lot of the attention right now, so will they do a similar thing where they just leech off of each other and neither one of them has the eye-popping stats to get where they need to be? And you look at all of these guys in the Big Ten, like so many guys are gone. Like Darius Taylor is probably the leading returning rusher. Maybe Jonah Coleman at Washington if he's back, I can't remember. But there's not a lot of established running backs that are expected to be outstanding. And maybe there's a bunch more like James Peoples, who he rushed for 200 yards last year, and it's like we know about him, but how many guys out there, on the other teams, Woody Marks is gone from USC. Who else do they have? Like, I'm sure there's somebody, but I do like this pick. And as I said, he was number 5 on my list. I just wanted to mention that. Just had him number 5. So it's basically like I just picked him.
Pretty much.
Tom, pretty much. Let's go. I'm going to go with a guy that, regardless, I'm going to have to vote for if I vote this year. I'm going to go with Jermaine Matthews because cornerback, junior, Ohio State. He involves himself with the plays. He's a guy that is excitable, and so he gets some of that talk. And you wonder if there's this negative connotation of IGB, Davis Igbinosun, where he grabs, and he's physical and he holds. Whereas like some of the shine then gets put onto Jermaine Matthews, and people like him better and expect more from him. And I do think he's going to make some plays. But you start to get into the weeds of like we keep talking about, the name recognition. And I'll tell you exactly how it happens. In terms of the voting, at least for media, all the schools' SIDs nominate players to be put on the list. And so then as you go and vote, basically you've got like drop downs and names. Like if they didn't provide names of offensive linemen for media, you're like, and so Jermaine Matthews, I think, has played enough last year and will do some good things that he won't be an unknown guy. So I feel pretty good about him as my 4th pick here, and looking at the other guys on the list. Tom, I feel like, and feel free to talk about Jermaine Matthews if you want a little bit more, but I feel like maybe we're missing some people on the offensive line.
Yeah, we are. I have a name on the offensive line, but I do kind of want to pick someone on the defensive line too.
No,
and
go with the offensive line, Tom.
Ohio State having a quarterback who's first team All Big Ten seems like it's something that happens a lot too. So, there's some. I'm first of all, but Jermaine Matthews, yes, he was on my list as well. I had him on my list even ahead of Davis Igbinosun, because I think there's a certain segment of the voting populace that has already made its mind up about Davis Igbinosun, and Davis Igbinosun is the guy who gets called for all those penalties, and that's going to be something that there are going to be people who, no matter what kind of season he has, he's the guy that gets called for all those penalties, and so therefore I'm not going to vote for him. So I think he has the bad kind of name recognition, probably somewhat unfairly. Jermaine Matthews feels like he's going to get a Gus Johnson nickname, and he's going to have a PBU. And, you look at the spring this year, and it just sort of felt, I don't have numbers on this, but it just sort of felt like they weren't throwing at Davis Igbinosun. They were sort of throwing in the direction of Jermaine Matthews, and Jermaine Matthews was breaking on a lot of balls and getting his hand on a lot of passes and just sort of in there making plays. And it's just going to take him stepping in front of one, so, Arch Manning out pass, and you step in front of it and you run it back for a touchdown, and he's calling you, you're not Maserati Marv, you're Jeep Germain or something like that. I don't know.
Jaguar.
Joe Germain. I love it. That's it. There's his nickname. Yes.
Well, the real quick, the Texas game, look what it did for James Laurinaitis in 2006. Like that, he exploded after that game, and that because of that game and because of Brent Musburger, the GOAT. I'm sorry, I did not put pointing to heaven, but he's very much
in
with
Vegas,
us.
I believe, which is not heaven. It's not anywhere close to heaven. We'll talk about how heaven works later. Anyway, so I think Jermaine Matthews sort of fits the profile of, as you said, like all the stuff that you said. We're thinking about this the exact same way. Like who could have a play that in the game that everyone's watching, that everyone goes, oh yeah, that's the guy for Ohio State who's a new starter, but boy, he's pretty good, and he's probably going to put up some decent numbers. You're going to have teams throwing at them this year a decent amount because you figure Ohio State's going to be up, so you're going to have opportunities to get a couple interceptions put together. He's explosive with the ball in his hands, so you could have a pick 6 or 2. He just kind of checks all those boxes where, when you're having that end of the year conversation for some kind of a major reward, when they're showing your highlights as they're talking about, hey, on college football final, they're talking about who are some of the best corners in football. He's going to have the interception where he's running it back. He's going to have the jump the out route to, break the pass up and do the big celebrate. Like he's going to have those kind of plays that you're watching on that. So he's going to be the kind of guy who gets talked about. That's kind of how this all goes. I am going to allow you to talk me into picking an offensive lineman here, and I don't love it, but I have three other names below the name that I'm about to say, and I actually had him ahead of James Peoples, and I got talked out of picking him earlier, but I'm going to say Ethan Onyanwa, and I think Ethan Onyanwa was someone who he was talked about as potentially someone who could go on as high as the second round in the NFL draft at the end of last season. Now he's coming back. He doesn't really have the name recognition, even though he has the experience. He has the tape to potentially be a relatively high NFL draft pick, but he doesn't have the name recognition. Again, that first game, you could get that, who is this guy? Where if things are going well for Ohio State early, and they're winning by 10 points in the third quarter, and they're running that they're running the highlight package coming out of halftime, where they're just saying, like, Julian Sayin or Lincoln Keenholz, whoever it is, boy, he's had all day back there in the pocket. And look at Ethan Onyanwa. He was playing at Rice last year, but now he's at Ohio State. And and that's how then everyone's watching. And this is, then now everyone knows your name. And now everyone's like, oh, the left tackle from Ohio State, he's really good. And then you don't watch the left tackle from Ohio State for the rest of the year because you're off covering Minnesota or you're off covering UCLA or whatever it is. But then at the end of the year, it's like, oh yeah, the left tackle from Ohio State, Ethan, what's his name? Ethan O something. I'll look that up and I'll vote for him. You have the opportunity, if you have a good game early, to go from, you don't have name recognition, but boy, then all of a sudden you do, and it's really good. And it just took one game. Just that is sort of the nature of being on the offensive line.
Yeah, I like that pick. He was ninth on my board, and that's where he went. I've pretty much nailed all of this so far, but I do think he's got he's like the new kid where have you heard about the new kid? And like this buzz builds. So there will be some focus on him because he is the left tackle, or we expect him to be the left tackle at Ohio State. And that brings some onus and some notoriety just by nature of the position. And if you play well in that big game, then you're going to start to build. So I am now left with the final pick in the draft of potential first-team All-Big Ten players. And I'm going to go with a guy that I did not even have on my list of 10. Because as I look at the list of potential other Big Ten players that could be all Big Ten first team, I'm thinking all this guy has to do is be better than Drew Aller. So I'm going to go with Julian Sayin with the final pick here. And really, there's about a 10-year stretch where every Ohio State quarterback was like all Big Ten, first team all Big Ten, or like 12 years where the only time it wasn't was Connor Cook from Michigan State in 2015 when Ohio State was having a quarterback battle. So I'm going to go with Julian Sayin because I feel like if you just have the kind of year that Will Howard had last year, and that's no small thing, but I don't expect Dante Moore to do what Dylan Gabriel did. Now, does that mean I shouldn't be expecting Julian Sayin to do what Will Howard did? Maybe. I know a lot of people like the Indiana kid. Of course, Bryce Underwood exists, and that's going to be a big thing. Luke Altmaier exists. Drew Aller is going to be the guy that everybody is picking, and so that is the competition. And I'll take that. I'll take that competition for Julian Sayin or, frankly, Lincoln Keenholz. And I am, this may backfire, Tom, but again, there are no stakes here. We're friends. This is all just in friendly competition. So I'm going Julian Sayin with my final pick.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable pick, and I had him on my list, and as we were kind of talking things through, I feel like if Penn State's 11-1, Drew Aller's kind of going to be the default pick, and if Oregon goes, if Oregon beats Penn State and Oregon's 12-0, Dante Moore is probably going to be something close to the default pick, and if Luke Altmaier in Illinois go, he's got enough name recognition, and Indiana's quarterback is the kid from Cal, Mendoza. He's going to be, I'm going to be tweeting Simpsons GIFs all year when he does stuff. So, that's going to help his name recognition. So, yeah, there's enough other quarterback competition, not to mention he does still have to win the starting job and then keep the starting job and stay healthy. So I think that's why I sort of shied away from him. I had him on my list, but I think it's entirely possible he does. It feels like you're going to be asking a lot for him because the bar for what it takes to be this is a really good Ohio State quarterback season is really high. Drew Aller is probably going to have better numbers this year just based solely on the fact that he actually has wide receivers this year. They just really did not have wide receivers last year. They brought in a couple transfers, including a kid from Syracuse who's pretty impressive. Yeah, he doesn't have Tyler Warren anymore, but that might actually mean he's driving the ball down the field a little bit more. So, and they might just be a little bit less cute, and you might just sort of rely on the run and throwing the play action passes off of there. So I think when in doubt, assume that people are going to lean on the sort of default answer unless they're given a reason not to. And unless they get killed in Columbus, and I don't think they're going to get killed in Columbus, I think I'm probably going to say Drew Aller is more likely. The other two names I had on my list, and I know we have hit our 10. The other two names I had on my list, in addition to the ones that you have said already, I had Edric Houston and Caden McDonald. And I think either one of them, you don't have Mason Graham this year. You don't have Kenneth Grant this year. So I don't think you're going in with quite this guy is going to be first team interior defensive line almost no matter what. I think you could end up with one of those guys having a really impressive statistical season, specifically because they're going to get leaned on a lot. And so this time next year, I'm probably picking Edric Houston as relatively high. As a third-year guy, this year as a first-year starter, you probably don't have quite the name recognition. And so I'll wait a year on him. You might not get another year to wait on Caden McDonald. This will be his third year, so he may be off to the NFL before he gets a chance. But those are the other two guys who I had on my list.
It would be interesting to see the rankings of the coaches of Ryan Day. Like, who would you like to see? Which 5 would you like to see Buckeyes be first team All Big Ten? And how high either Edric Houston or Caden McDonald would be on there? I thought about putting Edric Houston on my list. The two guys that I have on my list that did not go, Austin Seerveld and Kenyatta Jackson. Mm-hmm. And I had Seerveld 8th and Jackson 10th. So they're down the list. But two guys that if they, I think it's very possible for Austin Seerveld to be All Big Ten right tackle. Josh Fryer was All Big Ten, first team All Big Ten right tackle in 2023. Why? Because there's a lot of name recognition for playing at Ohio State. And he was also pretty good. And if you're pretty good and people know you, then you know what? And you're on the offensive line, that's good enough for most media voters. I can promise you that. So there you go. We have a total of 10 Buckeyes selected. We'll see how it goes. And again, friendly competition, no stakes. Unless I win, then we'll talk about it until the cows come home. So that will do it for us here. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the thumbs up. We would appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet done so. Hit the bell to be notified when we, for random reasons, just drop a live show, talk about the latest goings on in the NCAA in Michigan or whatever else is going on. It's good for you to hit the bell and to be notified of those things. And also you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com, where we are talking about all sorts of stuff, Ohio State football related. The college football world at its as it exists right now, we're also having discussion about the oncoming changes going on. Of course, tons of recruiting and team intel from all of us. Me, Tom, Kevin Noon, Jeremy Birmingham, Mark Givler. We're talking X's and O's and a lot going on there. So much recruiting that just looking at the list of the guys that Mark and Kevin talked to during their 2 weeks on the road is absolutely ridiculous. So they're back from their southern swing and willing to talk about it. So you can find all of that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And of course, sign up for the message board there at BuckeyeHuddle.com, presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.